You know, if I could be so bold as to say the number one question, fear, concern that I get from new growers about growing carnivorous plants are dying traps or pitchers. And so I thought I'd make a video today dedicated to that very topic. I'm going to show you what is okay and what is a normal process, why it's normal, and what is not okay, and when to worry. All that and more coming your way in just a moment. All right, so when we normally think of plants, we think long-term holding on to your leaves as a great thing. Plants grow leaves, non-carnivorous plants grow leaves for the explicit purpose of photosynthesis. And so carnivorous plants do that as well. So all of their leaves are in fact photosynthesizing, and that is where they're going to get their energy. It is a misnomer that carnivorous plants need insects in order to survive. They don't. They need them to grow. Carnivorous plants, just like any other plant, needs the sunlight to photosynthesize for health long term. Now, the difference is with carnivorous plants is they've also repurposed their leaves to be trapping mechanisms for insects in order to get fertilizer through nitrogen. And so that is where there's a huge separation between carnivorous and non-carnivorous plants. And so why did I just explain all that to you? Well, when it comes to non-carnivorous plants, the idea is hold on to your leaves as long as possible because that is what we need for survival, and we will use our roots to do all the other fertilizing, right? With a carnivorous plant, it wants it for photosynthesis, but it also wants it to catch a prey, and that extra step requires a ton of energy. It requires a ton of energy because it's being used as not only a trapping mechanism, but it's also actively working to produce enzymes to break down the prey that it catches and then to absorb that prey. And because of that, the plant wants to get rid of those leaves that it no longer needs as quick as possible. And so this is called a leaf turnover rate. Every plant has a leaf turnover rate. It just so happens carnivorous plants are much faster. Now, to further convolute the conversation, carnivorous plants, just like any other plants, tend to show when they're stressed through their leaves first. And so I'm going to teach you how to delineate between those two. Now, we're going to look at Sarracenia firstly here. And so you notice how these leaves or their pitchers are browning. This is actually a healthy sign, believe it or not. And the reason for that is this plant has captured a ton of insects. And so it has started to brown because it is going through what's called nitrogen burn. And so it's uptake, I don't know how you want to say that, but it was taken in so much nitrogen that it has actually burned the walls of the leaf, but it's also no longer going to be needed. And because of that, it's going to start browning away and dying. So that's your first clue. Is your plant doing what it's supposed to do? Is it turning brown because it is capturing prey? And if that's the case, that is a good thing. Now let's move over to Venus flytraps, and here you'll see the same thing occurring. See how this is browning at the tips? Venus flytraps are a little bit different. They have a very, very high leaf turnover rate, and that is because of the extent of energy that is required to maintain these traps. And so you may only get 2 closes out of these, maybe even as little as 1 before the traps will die off. Now, some of the things that you're going to look for in a healthy die-off, so I'll show you this right here. This is not healthy, but we'll come back to where, see if I can get it in the view right here. That is not healthy, and we'll get back to that in a minute. But some of the things you're going to look for is like this right here is healthy. It caught a insect, here's one too, and now it is starting to die off. Also notice it's only 1 trap at a time that is dying off. That is a good sign of a healthy plant. Now, let's talk about plants that I don't have out here currently, Nepenthes. Nepenthes are the same thing. They are going to start to die off similar to your Sarracenia from the top down. And the reason why they do that is both evolutionary, survival, and it's also just practical. And so both of these pitfall traps have fluid in them at the bottom of their pitcher, and that's where the carnivory happens, and that's where things are breaking down. So it makes sense, not only from a practical standpoint, that it's going to die from the top down because there's fluid in here that hydrates the bottom half of the leaves. The other thing is it wants to keep that part available as long as it can, because it can continue to utilize that leaf for as long as it can. And so as long as you're seeing a top down dying, you're in good shape. Now, if you start to notice that things are dying from the base up, especially on Nepenthes, that's when you start to have issues. Also, leaves will die off because they get too much sun. And so that could be considered problematic, but it not always is. So we'll go back to this one. Remember, I told you this is not healthy. What is happening here is it's a combination of things. Venus flytraps like a ton of sun, but they also like to sit in water. But here in Florida right now, we are having a very big drought. And so these plants are sitting baking in the sun, which they normally would love, but they don't have the adequate amount of water to offset. It doesn't mean the plant is going to die. It just means that it is currently stressed. And so the soil should be moist, but it is just barely damp. So that is a sign that there is potential issue there. You can also notice at the base how things are sort of dying off en masse. That's the next thing you want to look for. Are you having a lot of traps die off all at once, which will be a sign of stress? And so something like this is a sign of stress, potentially, but not too terribly. It is going to be just fine. Also understand that plants are going to react differently. And so here we have a plant that is clearly stressed, and normally they'll give you a good sign ahead of time, like this yellowing of the leaves before they start turning brown. But these next to it are perfectly fine. And that means that not all plants are the same, and that is okay. The biggest thing is not to get too nervous too quickly. These plants have a very high leaf turnover rate, and so if you do grow carnivorous plants, understand going into it that they are going to brown often. And so they're going to keep their traps open sometimes up to a couple months, but other times maybe only a couple weeks, and then they will kill them off and go on to the next. Some of the signs that you're going to see is you're going to start to see stress in other ways. You're going to start to see some sunburning, so the leaves will start to turn red in Nepenthes. You'll start to see some yellowing in Venus flytraps. Then it will start to turn brown on you. Now, if it's doing it in mass, that's when you've got a problem. If it looks healthy, if the plant looks healthy, you're in good shape. And with Venus flytraps, where you really have to get concerned, and with most carnivorous plants in general, is when it starts at the crown or the base of the plant. That's when you know you've got either a fungal issue, a really big stressing situation for the plant, or something else is going terribly wrong. We tend to look at these plants as if they're animals because they have such strong personalities. And so we tend to think of that like they're in some way all or nothing. But the fact of the matter is these plants will ebb and flow. Some of them will have exceptionally good years, and then the next year they will perform very poorly. It doesn't mean the plant is dying. It just means that it's a plant and it's doing its normal thing. We don't tend to think too much about that when they're non-carnivorous because they don't have that added element of personality to them. So my takeaway is this. Your takeaway should be this. Don't overanalyze your plants. Understand that they have a high leaf turnover rate, and so they are going to be turning them over, especially if they're actively eating. And that the last thing I'll give you for feedback is this. These plants grow these pitchers. Nepenthes grow the pitchers. Venus flytraps grow their traps. Nepenthes is really big on this. If it has the fertilizer it needs, it's not going to grow the traps for you. And that is because it doesn't need it. It grows those traps for fertilizer. And if it doesn't need the fertilizer, it's not going to grow them. And so it might focus on other things like growing its vine longer. And so those are things to take into consideration as well. As long as the plant as the whole looks healthy, you're in good shape. I hope this has helped, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.